Welcome to my ePortfolio. This is Richard Close. You can get more detail at richardclose.com. I will attempt in the next 4 sections to distill down 20 plus years of learning industry and instructional design and program development. There'll be 4 areas. One, we'll discuss our methods that I use, the design, take a look at some of the designs I've done, the techniques I use in collaboration and instructional design, and transformation. Take a look at programs designed for cultural change and social transformation on a global scale. And with that, let's go on. Welcome back. Now let's talk about methods. In terms of methods, I've been lecturing on learning methodologies and collaborative techniques for quite some time now. In the upper left-hand corner, you'll see from the UNESCO grant for digital storytelling with African youth. Here we developed workshops, worked with African youth to tell the story of their lives. On the high-end things, I've lectured many times in the Global Education Conference, other conferences, including an invitation to speak at the United Nations Sustainable Goals and Education Conference that took place in February, dealing with massive and sustainable collaborative learning. You can see all of this up on SlideShare and in my ePortfolio on richardclose.com. My methods in terms of instructional design are ADDIE. However, I do a rapid prototyping methodology on analysis, design, development, implementation. What I use is templated documentation so the SME sees very clearly every single phase, so changes can get caught and done very early on and not while we're in the middle of articulate or captivate scripting. It's a great process. The SME tends to be very happy with what they have because they're engaged in the development process. I'm also the developer of Global Learning Framework. Now I will use a client's process templates and style sheets. However, when I am allowed to step out into a truly collaborative learning experience, I will use this methodology. Way back in 1988, I was the Jumpstart speaker for the International E-Learning Conference in San Diego. I was also ghostwriting some of the early papers on learning management systems. My concern is that the sequential learning, the way textbooks functioned, and the way learning management systems were designed, is not how we actually learn. We learn on a relational basis, searching out problems, and we also learn on a social basis, which is something Dewey and Linderman and other adult learners have known for years. I coined the phrase search learning, and that we had to take a look at how we develop curriculum differently and how we developed learning management systems. This immediately divided the audience. Years later, I was contacted by one of the consultants in that group and asked me to take a second look at that theory. Because after that, Web 2.0 came in, Facebook came in. Hard to believe that these collaborative tools that we live with today were not existing back then. But as they came in, they replicated what I was talking about. This is what I came up with. It's called the Global Learning Framework. Let's take a look at Saturday night and there's nothing to do. We start with a problem, and then maybe we'll get online and we'll explore and see what different things that are out there. And one person in the group will say, hey, let's go to this cafe or whatever. Someone chooses and adopts a piece of information. Everyone goes to the event, experiences, which is a collaborative social process, and then they publish it. So it's problem, discover, adapt, collaborate, and share. And as you can see, this is a very different sequence than typical instructional design is. Now, what's really interesting about this process is once I share out on the internet, then it changes everything. So traditional LMSs and traditional textbooks, you don't write at them. But on the internet, we're rewriting the whole textbook, a global textbook in a sense, on a regular basis. So I can design curriculum using the same method. And when we use the same method, we end up with change. I call these micro-learning paths. Once someone shares, there's a change place takes that with them as a individual. And once they share on the internet, there's a change that takes place globally. Now, what's happening is that billions of these learning experiences are happening at any given moment, constantly changing and altering. And this is the collaborative way we learn globally on the internet. And what's really interesting is while everyone's learning through Google, YouTube, and other methodologies, they're concurrently dealing with academics. And the academics are disconnected to this in many different ways. So here was the conundrum to do with. My instructional design uses both the methodologies of the university or the corporate institution, how they use it, but when I can step outside of it and use this methodology, which is one that I used in terms of the UNESCO grant for digital storytelling in Africa, things tend to get very interesting. Transformation. Transformation theory in adult learning is very intellectual. I'll think about it is a great way to do it. It's really based on reflection. However, when you deal with the world of poverty and trauma, I've worked with this both in Africa and developing curriculum for homeless women in Bridgeport, Connecticut, you find something completely different. Intellectual transformation theory is based on entitlement, where the research came from. Entitlement research on PhD candidates is not exactly a reflection of the market as it stands as a whole. In entitlement, I have a series of experiences of life. One builds onto the other, scaffolding, and each one is the success of another with a faith of a good outcome at the top. However, poverty is a reverse funnel, and it's a downward stroke. Lack of resources, poor role models, denial and lack of everything, rejection, post-traumatic stress, what a future. Poverty is abuse in the most classic definition of it. And the problem is scaffolding in poverty is the reverse direction. So scaffolding doesn't work. So how do we get one world into the other? Well, ironically, we can go back to Dewey and Lindemann again in adult learning. And so my methodologies are what I call a replacement methodology. So we go into the poverty situation, like a rescue mission or homeless center, or even a community college for that sense. And we replace the negative models with positive experiences. So it's reflection, but the reflection must be based on a set of values that have been changed, experience that have been changed. So we create a whole series of successes, and this builds a positive practice. This is one of the methodologies that we can see the inner city charter schools having a lot of success with, and that gives us a changed life. And I've actually had students that have been in prostitution as young children, abuse, alcohol, and drugism, and watch them go through and get a master's in social work from a local university. So this is kind of how it's done, and it's very different than an intellectual. It's an experiential transformation process. Okay, so now that we have the theory down pat, let's take a look at the design, because theory is just shelfware unless you can bring it into a practical design and a practical experience. Welcome back. This is Richard Close, and now we'll talk on the topic of design. Design to me is that learning is a both social experience and a contextual experience. So my designs tend to tap into local environments, images that are relevant to the particular student, where they're coming from. The real trick for one-to-many e-learning modules, particularly on LMSs, is that it's hard to make things relevant from a contextual point of view. So images and all of that must be able to do that from a remote place. No, this is not my design, but it's typical of the medical profession and what we might get in a design. But in mental health, someone's in crisis. So the challenge that was hit with me is, could we develop a website where healing started at the very first glance? And that's under the concept that we start learning within 1 second of looking at something. And as a result, we want to take a look at the culture and the environment of the Hamptons, which is out on Long Island, which is surrounded by water. And people, when they tend to have issues, tend to go to the water. It's pretty much a universal concept there. So for this clinic that has already grown 400% in the past couple of years, we wanted to establish a look that really healing took place from the first glance. Let's see if we can do that. This photograph was taken actually as a walk near the clinic. Ironically, it's called Storm Harbor. And we rebranded East End Mental Health with the colors that are still clinical, secure, very much of the healthcare industry, but however, creating a state of calm. And let's see how that worked out. So our challenge is to create a calming effect that rather than the clinical, sterile, white, I'm separate than you, this is something I'd like to step into and be a part of. When we hit welcome, we have a photograph. Well, this photography is mine of the entrance into the facility. Everything moves nice and slowly and gently. You can see here, this actually does work on the cell phone. It's a very calming effect for new patients. Rather than just pull out your ID card and show up. We use warmth in the photography of the clinicians that are there. And you can notice in copy, which I developed for them, rather than saying issues, we refer things to life challenges. We have both the challenge and you see someone taking risks to get over something in the same picture. We look at our approach. Our approach is humanistic, integrated. We had to get those images. But for most part in mental health, people want to get back to where they were. Also, to create a site that has resources to find out more. As you see, everything's gentle. Here's another photograph within the clinic itself of how to contact people. This one on emergency is an interesting image. Again, we're having the water, but we wanted a design where someone is looking down at their own, for instance, phone for help, additional emergency help they can get, and that we're here to support them. So that is the essence of this website. It had really quite a dramatic impact, not only on their clients, but other MDs from the surrounding area actually called them up and commented, the owners on the website. So here again, the cell site, again, everything's very clean. You can see the images of the water and peacefulness. This is totally unlike any other website on Long Island as far as we can see. We did a fair amount of research on that. So the other thing about knowing your community is things should be fun and engaging. This is for like the hardest group you could have. This is an automotive shop in high school, and this particular course done in Captivate is both used as a flipped classroom project where someone can look at this first before going into class, and then also it's used up on the whiteboard in bits and pieces to teach certain modules.
Yo, you want a life with fast cars and big toys? Well, it starts right here. It starts right now. So there's three things you gotta know. 1, what the parts do. 2, what the parts are. And 3, how to fix it when it broke. So follow the 3 tracks and get cracking.
So you can see we're taking the boring stuff of 4-stroke engines and we're very much putting a teenage spin on it. There's 2 things to this course. One is the actual learning of how a 4-stroke engine works, but part of automotive class is career development. It's mentoring and coaching students to really develop an engineering or a quality point of view rather than just horsing around. So what we did in this course is we put a little story in it, Once Upon a Time. This is a story about the legendary 60s boat
called Miss Bardall, which has a 3,000 horsepower fighter engine inside of a boat that literally can fly across the top of water, that was undefeated for a number of years and then rebuilt. Next thing that we did with another high school class was we took a look at the situation of students coming in. It's very chaotic. You have 20 different students coming in. You have 10 different types of power tools. Students don't know what to expect. There's a lot of safety issues, so we created this course called the Physics Shop Safety. All these courses are on richardclose.com, and you can take a look at these films. What was interesting about this is the challenge of, could we create a teaching video using simply an iPad and PowerPoint, and you can see these are PowerPoint images on top of iPad photographs. It is a sequence where you see the physics, these arrows and things move, as to what to expect, how a board will move in your hand on a table saw or a sander or something like that. And then you'll see a video clip of how it is done the proper way. When we showed this, the second semester students saw this, approached the equipment totally different. It was very interesting. The way they stood, the way they were prepared to face the equipment from safety point of views was quite dramatically different. The other thing, this is also a case of using flipped classroom, and in the classroom, each step of building a table, for instance, they progress into a different tool. So even though they've seen the whole thing in as homework, we show each particular tool and the physics of that particular tool when they get introduced to it that day. So again, this is a dual use of reusable learning objects. In a collegiate level, again, we can take a look at vetting information, but what we want to do is use images that, rather than just a white background with talking heads, we'll use eating pizza, we'll use collegiate experiences that are relevant, that make them challenge a little bit of what they're doing right then and there. So we're trying to get the material to move and integrate into their life. So that is, from a design point of view, kind of my approach. My approach, again, is really to get the material to integrate as close to what their experience of life is about, and thereby making the information as sticky as possible. This is Richard Close again, and we are going to move into techniques. One of my key trademarks of techniques is to use context and to weave both social context, the context of the course, and weave values and experiences of the adult learner into the online learning course. Let's take a look at a couple of those techniques. Now here's kind of a gamification piece. What you see is we have an elevator, and rather than doing the straight timeline, each floor on the elevator represents a timeline.
Opening doors.
Now, one of the things we're going to do later on, after looking at this, is ask kind of a values clarification or reflective question before they get to each floor. But this will give you kind of an idea.
Opening doors.
This all has its own navigation, as you can see, even though it's running in D2L, and it uses the D2L navigation below. But in each case, we're using color and graphics and overlapping for memory retention for that period of time. So let's move on to another look at how we do things. Now, this particular Captivate was used for an automotive class, high school class, and it ended up being used in two different ways. The first was as a flipped classroom experience, where the night before they would start to take apart four-stroke engines. They would take this particular quiz and horse around with it. The other thing that happened is, when we did this, the students asked we put it up on the whiteboard, and we divided the class into 3 teams, and we timed which team could do these the fastest. Now, it is a drag and drop, again, but it has some interesting twists and turns to it. So let's see if I can get this right. Val Springs are up there, and they've gotten about 4 pages on this e-learning course showing them where these parts are prior to this.
And we're doing everything here with an automotive feeling to it and graphics to it. And let's see if I can get this right. I always get these lines slightly off. As you can see, I can, it's letting me switch things around, but still stepping in, which is kind of nice. Okay, the port's way over here. Cam lobes are way up top. Let's see, I got piston rings are there. Yep, and the block is down on the bottom. So let's see if I got this right. Oh, rats. When they do get this right, they hear a dragster taking off, and the first time the class got hit with this, it was filled with lots of laughter, and that was a motivating thing to put it up on the whiteboard and do it for speed. Okay, let's talk about the topic of making them work for it. Sometimes it's good to just put on an exercise that has not really a right or wrong, but tests or makes the student reflect based on their own values or perceptions on life. Here they've had modules that talked about what empirical scientific method is and what fad and the impact of fad-based media and psychology does. Give them a typical Venn diagram. So let's take a look and see how this might work. Let's say Mayo Clinic. Journal stuff is pretty much empirical. It's watched by other people, and this is how we were trained early in the course. And of course, Strong Magazine and National Enquirer are fad-based stuff. And well, CDC is very much research, but FDA, I don't know. Like, so the pharmaceutical companies run it. Maybe sometimes it is, sometimes it isn't. I'll throw it here in between. Oh, 60 Minutes. Well, I might have had a liberal upbringing or a conservative. I'll put it in the middle. Sometimes it's research, sometimes it's kind of faddish. And so when they hit the finish prompt, of course, they get a piece that says, reflect on your value and your politics and your religion and who you hang out, and that will cloud your judgment. And of course, that's the real lesson that we want to do. Now, what they do here is they copy the Venn diagram and they post it up in the discussion board. They have to comment at least on two others diagrams on whether they've thrown things, put things on one side or the other. Sometimes e-learning courses will run parallel to textbooks. And here a textbook has a very dry table on it that shows different things, servers, laptops at certain price points that deals with computer engineering. Now, again, it's a very dry, simple thing. So let's put some fun into it, but let's weave the course into career choices. It's very important as students have an idea when they're learning that there's some purpose to this learning that goes into the future. So in doing that, we've told them that they're entering into an engineering department for their first time and learning the ropes, and this is how it goes. Congratulations, rookies, you get to clean up the warehouse. So, of course, this is kind of fun and crazy, a little Nickelodeon type thing at the end. But as opposed to just a price point for different things, the students get to see if they learn engineering, these are all the different layers of the marketplace, from down to 50-cent Hallmark cards all the way up into massive Cray or Sun supercomputers. So again, this is this contextual play factor that we can add into our learning. Now, collaboration is a key thing, and a lot of the old methodologies that pre-exist the advent of Facebook, of which many of our e-learning textbooks are filled with, collaboration is what really makes this work. In Africa, we say that learning is a social experience, and later on while I'm reading Dewey, he's basically saying the same thing. So I could use a textbook thing on binary code. And please put in your blog 3 salient points about binary code and comment on 2 other people's, which is just regurgitating what's in the textbook. Or we have the students in this case go online, go into a binary translator and put 2 words in it, like get milk, and then copy the binary code into the discussion board. And then when they have to comment on other people's stuff, they have to respond in terms of 2 words, but also in binary code. So they're kind of this cool matrix using binary code back and forth, having fun with a translator, but it gives them some real hands-on fun work to do. At the same time, learn how machine languages work and get translated. And now we will go on to transformation in the next video. Welcome back. This is our 4th and last module of my ePortfolio. My name is Richard Close and the topic is transformation. As I said in the first module, I refute the concept that transformation is an intellectual reflective process. Intellectual reflection is really just a process like a computer process. And as we know in computer programming, we have garbage in, we get garbage out. Transformation really comes from changing the situation. Entitlement is scaffolding life experience, one positive thing after another, sure with some setbacks, but mostly positive with a faith in the future. Poverty and PTS gives us a series of experiences or situations that alter our values, our character, our perceptions, even physical reality for us into a more pessimistic future. Sometimes someone that lived a life of entitlement can go to war, and whole concepts or paradigms of experiences about trust in people become shattered, and we come back, we have a hard time adapting one reality into the next. So the way to turn this around, going back to kind of a Dewey adult learning thing, is to change the situations. One of the things that's interesting about rescue missions and their 18-month new life programs to turn people around is you take someone that's been on the streets doing survival, lying, cheating, doing whatever they can to get by, but mostly it's a life of just taking. And you put them into an 18-month experience where everything is flipped inside out and upside down, where all of a sudden they have to be the ones that are offering food to other people, clothing other people, cleaning for other people, and helping other people out. And it gives them a completely different experience. Positive experiences in literacy programs, values serving others and contributing, becoming a contributing part of society and the community. And the community basically respects highly men that are going through these programs, along with women. And the community basically has a high level of respect for people that are going through these programs because they know they're very, very difficult. It's a 6 o'clock in the morning till 10 o'clock at night experience, but that will change the lifestyle. So basically, we have to replace the experiences. So here is a case where I developed a Discover Your Gifts program. This was a program that was 8 lessons along with a life skill program that was initially taught for a year in the Women's Center of the Bridgeport Rescue Mission, of which this house is, and that's one of the women down below. What was very interesting about this is we flipped a lot of things around. So one of the first courses was on learning skills using the VARC program. And what we did is we used it as a way of not discovering what limitations people have, but discovering where their strengths were and how to build on it and how to study on it. And all of these lessons were a collaborative place where there was a little bit of learning, but most of it was around a long table with 18 to 14 women in it. And frequently I would show up with just a little bit of curriculum and think that how in the world could I fill 2 hours, and we would go to 3 hours with the content, because people have a lot of self-teaching and teaching they can share with one another's. The whole thing would evolve in a very electric way. So it was a great program. Another program and how I work with transformation on a global basis, I was asked to speak on massive sustainable collaborative learning for the Sustainable Development Goals in the United Nations headquarters. And this was also based on some of the research and work I did on a UNESCO grant to build a digital story community that hit about a dozen countries in Africa called This Is My Story. I am Africa, This Is My Story. And it's a whole series of YouTubes, which are still posted in a community in Facebook, on YouTube, excuse me. And this was, again, a collaborative way of learning, of students sharing their experiences of why they've gotten so far as they have, who helped them do that. And the feeling was quite electric in the room when we did it. On giving back, this is a presentation that was really for demonstration audio purposes for teaching in Africa. It contains the photography I took in the Kenya Rift Valley. Please excuse the fuzziness of the pictures. The whole idea was to focus on audio, but I think for a couple of minutes, about 5 minutes, this is worth a watch. In the remote Kenyan Rift Valley of Kitale, the purpose-driven church has built a life between a church and a town. In a unique model for every paid student, they take on a street child. In a place racked with poverty and wars, learning thrives and lives are transformed. Education in the African culture is more of a collaborative social process. Unlike U.S. education's culture of individual competition leading for financial success, their learning is a gift, blessing, ticket out of desperation, and a way to be a contributor to the community. It is pride. The purpose-driven school is a haven for changing lives. Funded mostly through local town people in Kitale, Margaret and Moses understand that learning is a social process between students and the needs of the community. Plagued by lack of funds, facilities, and opportunities at graduation, students are motivated by faith and community connection. Not unlike much of African schools, 3 children share a desk, 1 workbook, while others stand in the back. When tired from standing, they rotate into seats. And yet, to be at school is a huge honor. One time, a few weeks before the election and tribal wars, I was helping a leadership training program. A monsoon drowned out our talk on the tin roof, and so we burst into song until it passed. After about 3 songs, it did. Listen to the onslaught of praise and song against the pounding on the roof. The purpose-driven school embraces a world of tribal wars, refugees from Sudan, genocide, orphans, the abused from extreme poverty. The school offers a safe place, guidance, skills, and hope. It is the safe field of faith that deep transformation and hopelessness of spirit can take place. Often the best way to transform a community is through song. Listen to the message of these young women, bringing their message to the community to support them.
Working people of all kinds, my mommy and daddy, my best friends always. They wanted me to grow spiritually, be a better person in future. But do you know this was only a wish, that even today we still wish, and wish. Dear mommy and daddy, we want you daily. Every day we long for someone to encourage us. Mommy, do you know we have
In the 1920s industrialized education system of the U.S., educators like Dewey and Lindemann warned us that learning was in fact a social process, something that Africa has known all along. So why don't you come and help and teach in Africa? You'll never be the same ever again. So that concludes our ePortfolio. Thought I'd leave it with something fun. My name is Richard Close again. You can find my whole ePortfolio at richardclose.com. And we'd be happy to help you in any way we possibly can to use learning to transform the world into a better place. Thank you for your time.